Yes, Akshat, we are live now. You can start.
Okay, great. Great. Just a second. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Akshat, and I'm a third year student at National Law School. I was AIR 5 in 2022, and so I'm taking this series of lectures on critical reasoning called CR Brahmastra. So what we're basically doing here is that we are sort of working on the very fundamentals of critical reasoning, in the sense that we're going to talk about a little bit of concepts such as what are premises, what are conclusions, what are, like, how do you go about solving strengthened questions, weakened questions, assumption questions. These are some of the questions which regularly see in CR sections in CLAT mocks and even in the CLAT paper itself. So in our previous lesson, we covered what are premises and what are conclusions. So, just to summarize, the whole idea of critical reasoning is that you have to engage with arguments. Now, what arguments are made up of is basically a premise and a conclusion. So, a premise is like a fact, an observation, based on which the author concludes something or the author argues something. And if you see a lot of your uh, passages in your CLAT paper, they are generally about they're generally about this, right? They're generally about can you sort of identify how the argument works? So, like, let's any passage which you see, if you're able to break it down into what are the premises of the author and what are the conclusions which the author is making, you're sort of halfway there. You sort of figured out how to go about a question and how to understand a passage, right? So, uh, so that was what we covered in the first session. We talked about what are certain words which you can use to identify a premise, identify a conclusion. Now we also talked about how there are no direct questions on premises and conclusions. So it's not like you will, like, the CLAT paper will directly ask you what is a premise, what is a conclusion. But despite that, it's very helpful in understanding how do you solve strengthen questions, weaken questions, assumption questions, or even main idea questions, right? And so the assignment which I gave all of you is that after that session, if you, let's say, did any sectional test, any worksheet, I hope you found that helpful. I hope you found premises and conclusions helpful in the sense that, okay, you were able to maybe understand the passage better. We also covered counter premises in the previous lesson. Now, what are we going to do in this lesson is that we're going to look at central idea and inferences. Now, this is a topic which is common to reading comprehension and to critical reasoning across CLAT papers, CLAT mocks. You'll find common questions to this tune, and the logic remains the same. Like what we're going to talk about in this session, would- you can sort of apply that in your reading comprehension as well, and you can apply that in the critical reasoning as well. So what we're going to basically do is that we're going to uh, discuss what a central idea is. So central idea or main point or main purpose, it's pretty much the same thing, right? The question is basically asking you to sort of understand the essence of the passage, like what's the crux of the passage. Basically, let's say if I tell you that, okay, I've given you a passage of like what, 10 20 lines. Now I want you to summarize the most important part of that passage in a line or two. That's basically what central idea is, right? So we're going to talk about what is a central idea, how do you spot a central idea. Then we'll also solve a practice questions on central idea. I've picked up a couple of questions from the past year CLAT papers as well. So we'll sort of figure out if you can use these tips and tricks which I'm going to tell you to solve those questions. And after that, we're going to do inferences as well. So inference is slightly different from main idea questions because inference is like the most probable outcome or the most probable conclusion which you can draw from what the author has told you already, right? So we're going to talk about how does an inference work, to what extent is that probability important, and Then we're going to do some practice questions on inferences as well. Uh, Before that, tell me if there are any. Before I proceed, I hope there are no doubts or something. So that's what we're going to do in the session going forward. Uh, okay, just a second. Uh, can all of you see the screen? Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So we just move to the next slide. Just let me know if you can see the slides changing as well. Is the new slide visible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, great, great, perfect, perfect. Right. Okay, so like basically what a central idea is, right? So the central idea basically reflects the main essence of the author, which we talked about. Now, what I want you to focus on is that just two questions. Ask yourself these two questions whenever you were let's say working on a central idea question, or in general if you want to understand what the author is trying to say. See, usually CR passages are very argumentative in the sense that the author is trying to tell you something. They have a point to put across. It's not like reading comprehension where I can just give you a random passage from Alice in Wonderland, or like give a fictional passage or something like that. CR passages are largely economics related, or philosophical, or political. They're usually op-eds from your Indian Express, the Hindu. So they have an argumentative tone. What I basically mean is that the author is taking a position there. If let's say the author wants to comment on how the NEET exam happened, the author can either take a position that, oh, NEET exam is fine, it's okay if there were some hiccups, but that's still fine. The broader picture is that the NTA is a very competent body. That's one position which the author can take. The other position is that the author is very pissed off at whatever has happened with the NTA and NEET, and the author tells you that this is a very uh, it's a very crappy committee. Like the NTA should not conduct NEET or any other competitive exam, right? So those are a couple of things which the author can tell you, right? So that's the position of the author. Now that position of the author helps you identify what the central idea of the passage is. What this basically means is that, like, let's say the author of your passage, the passage is on the NEET NTA, and the author has taken a position that the NTA is an incompetent body. And then when you see a question which says, okay, find the central idea of the passage, you can eliminate those options which don't resonate with the position of the author. The option was to say, oh no, the author believes that the NT is a very competent body, strike it out. It's not the correct option for sure, because you know that's not the position which the author has taken, right? So that is one question which you need to ask yourself: what is the position of the author? The next question is, why has the author written this piece? So in general, whenever, let's say, even if you are writing something, you have an objective behind it. Maybe you want to educate the reader, or maybe you want to just put across a point, right? So those are a couple of things which you have in mind while while you're reading a passage, or while, let's say, why the author has written something. Okay, so yeah. And the next point is that yeah. So the next point is that basically a central idea is a statement which ties all the individual ideas of the author together. So in a passage, and this is what makes central idea difficult to gauge, because in a passage the author can present multiple ideas, right? But there will be something which is the essence of the author's passage, and that is what we need to spot. So if you can look at this Venn diagram, the author might give you idea one, the author might give you idea two, the author might give you an idea three. You need to find an option which sort of ties all these three ideas together. And that's your central idea, right? It will make more sense when we, let's say, do questions. But I hope I'm clear so far. Okay, before moving on here, are there any doubts, any questions which you
No,
want to
sir.
ask? Okay, great. Uh, okay, so now I'm going to tell you a couple of tricks through which you can eliminate the wrong options and get, like, it will increase your chances of spotting the correct central idea question, like the central idea option. So keep a couple of things in mind. Whenever you're solving a central idea question, try to avoid extreme statements which start with only, all, none. The reason is that whenever authors are writing a critically analytical passage, which is usually the passages which are asked in CR papers or CR sectionals, they take a nuanced position, they take a balanced position. This is something which we discussed in the last lesson as well, when we talked about counter premises, that the reason is that it has to be, sort of, they can't be like, oh, the government is amazing, the government is good, the government is perfect. These are extreme positions which any rational author will not take. Similarly, the government is all bad, the government does not know anything, and it's like this a crap load of people. That's not something which the an intelligent author will take. Authors take a nuanced position in the sense that they'll tell you, sure, the government went right here, here, and here, but they got this wrong or they got that wrong. That's how a general passage is. So then you can't go with options which are like, oh, the author thinks that the government is all wrong. Oh, the author thinks that only, let's say, a certain party is correct, rest all the other political parties are wrong. That's so your idea is to avoid those extreme statements. The second point is important because you need to eliminate options that focus on just one idea. So I showed you this Venn diagram here. There are three ideas and then there's a central idea. Options are generally say that author's main idea is idea one, author's main idea is idea two, author's main idea is idea three. Well, these ideas may be discussed in the passage, but the question is, do they form the central theme of the passage? So try to avoid very narrow one-liners which are ours, which are given as options, right? Now, another helpful tip is that in the last session, we discussed how to spot a conclusion. Uh, generally, generally, the main idea is very close. It's very close to the conclusion of the author. Okay. So if you're able to spot a conclusion, I gave you tips in the last session. Words like does, therefore, may, like, hence the author thinks, or I conclude. These words indicate the conclusion of the author, and if the conclusion matches one of the options in a central idea question, then you can go ahead with that, right? uh, Apart from that, another tip is that a central idea question, or in general all the options,
Moving to
they
next question, which is
they cannot
132.
contradict the author's line of argument.
Copyright means exclusive right to reproduce a work in any material form to issue copies of the work. Obviously, as per principle 3, the confession made before police is not a valid
The
confession.
thing,
So A gets ruled out. B says it is invalid as it was false. C says the confession is invalid as the moment was viewed by the reduced sentence. D both B and C. So in this
uh,
case, one
hi, I think someone's unmuted themselves. Can you
they were
please mute
terminated
yourself?
from asked to confess to the offense by the police in lieu of reduced sentence based on the
Yeah. Uh, okay, can you see the? Is the slide visible? Please, at any point if the slide is not visible, you can like unmute yourself and like tell me. Yeah, it's visible, right? And when I'm
Yes.
changing it, I'll tell you if I'm changing it, and if then also if it's not visible, just let me know. Okay,
Yes, sir.
great. Right. So just going back to the slide now. Can you see the slide where I've told you how to eliminate wrong options? Some points to remember.
Yes, it was visible.
I
Yeah.
can't, sir.
Uh, can you see it? Like,
I'll
Some
rejoin
points to
and speak.
remember. Yes,
yeah,
some
some
points to
points.
remember. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's visible, right? Okay, great. So, it cannot be a statement which contradicts the author's line of argument. That's another idea. Then, one very important hack is that you know you can look for words or phrases that repeat throughout the passage. So I don't have an example to demonstrate all these helpful points, but in general you can like take a screenshot of this if you want. While practicing passages from now on, perhaps keep these things in mind. It's a very simple thing in, let's say, in central idea questions. When you're reading a passage, try to look out for those words and phrases which repeat again and again. So if the author is talking about the incompetence of the NTA, then incompetence or anything negative about the NTA is going to repeat throughout the passage. So most likely your central idea will be somewhere along the lines of that repeating phrase or that repeating set of words, right? Okay, so let me know if you can see this practice question here. It says question 1, convince that the youth of today need to hear what DNA and genes mean. Can you?
Sir, can't
No,
see, sir.
some points to remember is visible.
Acha, okay, just a second. Wait.
Yeah, yeah. Now it's visible.
Now it's visible? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I just want you to go through this, give it some time, read the passage, try to keep the things which I taught you before in the previous session, like how do you figure out a premise, how do you figure out a conclusion, all of that, right? Keep that in mind. Try to uh, take a look at the tips and tricks which I told you before, like what is something which is repeating again and again. So you'll see that the word DNA comes again and again. So like this passage has something to do with DNA, but we'll figure out exactly what. So just give it a read. Okay. Is the screen visible or
Yes, the screen is visible.
okay? You can read the passage, right?
Yeah.
Shambhavi, try reconnecting if you want. I think the screen is visible from my end. Okay, so if you've read this, we'll advance to the next slide. Can you see the next slide?
Yeah, it's
Yes,
visible.
sir.
Okay, yeah. So just this concludes the passage. The passage. Just let me know what do you think is the central idea of the author, and also tell me how did you figure it out. Okay, do we have any answers? Any
Yes.
thoughts?
Option A, sir.
Okay, so we have option A. Any other ideas? Anyone? Okay, so everyone agrees with option A. Like, do we have any other? Hmm. Okay. 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 Now, okay, I'll give you the answer. The answer to this is option C, and I'll tell you why. Uh, so B obviously you can eliminate very easily, right? Because B only focuses on health and wellness. But if you look at the passage, it's also about it doesn't just talk about health and wellness. It also talks about the whole idea of you thinking that basically this whole first anecdote which she talks about, the Lodi garden thing. Why does she belong to the father's family, and when her DNA comes from both parents in equal parts, right? So it's not just about health and wellness, it's also about societal perception. That's one thing. So B is obviously out of the picture. A and C sure are a close call, but a very obvious thing which you could have pointed out is that A is only talking about nuanced approach to genetic research. Okay, and it's a very general statement. It does not tell me something concrete about what the author is saying. In any case, the author's argument is not restricted to genetics research in general. Rather, the author's argument is about no using DNA and genetic research as a tool to sort of change the societal perceptions which we have, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, and that is why C is a much better option, because that tells us that okay, because the author's argument is largely this, that because the author is saying that okay, it's an indispensable knot that holds together the tapestry of India. The whole idea is that genetic research on DNA per se can be used to challenge societal norms and practices not based on societal fact, and that is an idea which is being conveyed uh, throughout the passage. The first anecdote, the second idea, that cancer free life, death, and all of that. So, and the whole idea that the word, so the tricks which I told you, the word DNA, genetic research, it repeats itself again and again, right? So, which is why a better option here would be option C. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, Great. So, okay, so I'll take you to the next passage. Let me know if the second question is visible to you. It says, I am a PhD scholar. Is the slide visible?
No, sir.
Okay, just a second.
Yes.
It's visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So take some time to read this. I am a PhD scholar in one of the seven old IITs. Blah blah blah. Give yourself some time. Uh, I have changed the slide. Is the change slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, so can you read the four options? Are they visible on your screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What do you think would be the correct answer? And if you can, like, tell me why would you eliminate the other incorrect options as well?
Sir, I think option D is right.
Okay, so option B for Bombay, right?
No, sir, D for Delhi.
D. Okay, great. Yeah, all of you are correct. The correct answer is, in fact, option D. And let's just figure out why the other options are wrong so that it helps everyone. Supervisors make the lab environment toxic by listening to gossip, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the author does talk about toxicity. And if you read this line uh, here, I am talking about the serious toxicity amongst the fellow lab mates. So the author is talking about toxicity, but the source of that toxicity is the fellow lab mates and not solely the supervisors. Okay, so this is very interesting because the author is acknowledging that there is toxicity from the supervisors, but the author is saying, but what I specifically want to focus on is the toxicity from my colleagues, from my peers. That is why it's important to understand the nuance of each passage. All right. So that is why very clearly we can eliminate option A. Option B is not supported at all because the author does not tell us that it leads to failed scientific results, right? Nowhere does the passage mention that, oh, because we are toxic, scientific results are failed. The author is not concerned about the success of those scientific results. He's only saying that this toxicity is problematic. Now, option C, I think, is a perfect example of me telling you that the author gives you multiple ideas, but all those ideas are not the central idea. So the author does say this, that there is pin drop silence, nobody greets you with a smile or anything. That is a point, but is that the central point of the author? It's not. The author does not go about, oh, my peers don't greet me, it's bad, nobody looks at me, fla fla. That's not the thing, right? So option D captures the essence of the passage in the sense that the option D acknowledges that labs are anyway academically challenging. However, the issue of toxic lab environment is something which is even more problematic and very less talked about. So I hope this makes sense.
Yes,
In fact,
sir.
very clearly, so that's the idea. Sometimes the main idea is very clearly stated in the passage itself. There is one issue that is hardly gets ever talked about, which is that of toxic lab environments. This is given to you right there, right? So that's the best part. Like the author will themselves tell you that that's what I'm going to talk about, and that will become your central idea uh, answer. Okay. All right. So can you check? Can you is question number three visible on your screens?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Great. Great. This is a question which I think was asked in the 2023 paper, if I'm not wrong, or the 2022 paper. But what do you think is the correct answer? Okay, so uh, Krishna thinks that it's option C. Do we have uh, any other suggestions, any other answers for this, or does everyone agree with option C? Okay, we got a 1B as well. Okay, let's see. So there's like C and B. Okay, let's take a look. All right, so the correct answer is option C, but let's figure out why option B is wrong. Just give me a sec. Yeah. Okay. So this question particularly, implores you to understand the position which the author is taking. Is the author's position pro humor, or is the author's position against humor? That is something which you need to figure out. And if you're able to figure that out, then you will be you'll understand why B is incorrect and why C is the correct answer. If you read the last few lines, the author tells you that uh, they have been receiving so basically this ruling which has come out, it sort of protects humor, right? And and the author says it's very strange that because of humor, or because of trying to be humorous, people are roped into this FIR, they are brought before the judge. And that is the essence of the passage. The author says that that is what is funny. You trying to be funny lands you in a prison, lands you before the judge. That is itself an idiocy, right? So he says his insightful observations only highlight the idiocy and absurdity that surround the growth of the offense taking tribe, which means that he is agreeing that this offense taking tribe that takes offense at the drop of a hat at every humorous joke, they're idiots, right? So 126 option C resonates with the position of the author, that there's an unwelcome decrease in people's sense of humor because people are taking offense at everything, right? Option B sort of goes against the position of the author because option B says that, oh, humor is being used as a garb to offend others. So you should, control this humor. That this humor is not so humorous, it is offensive. But the author's position is opposite to this. The author is saying humor is humor. If you are taking so much offense, then you are a crybaby. So don't be a crybaby about it. Now, do you get the essence of the author? That is the position which the author is taking. So the author is taking a pro-humor position. The author is saying humor should be protected. You should not use FIRs or like these legal processes to stifle someone's humor, which is why option C is correct. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Um, okay, so with this, we'll go ahead. Now we'll come to what is an inference. Uh, can you see the slide? What is an inference? Yeah, Krishna, sort of option B is sort of, weakening the main essence in that previous question. So, another tip which I told you is that the central idea cannot contradict the author. So, if option B is contradicting the author, it cannot be the right answer. All right. Okay. Uh, okay, so just give it a read. So, one important tip, an inference statement is always a true statement, which means that it is true in light of the passage. Okay. So, same principle that an inference statement cannot contradict the author, because inference is something that you're deriving from what is already there before you, right? And it's a logical inference. So, the thing about inferences is that an author will not explicitly state them within the passage, but that is something which you most probably conclude from the passage. So you draw an inference. Inference is not given on the face of it. Although in CLAT, you will see a lot of questions where the inference is directly stated. So then, you just need to find out that statement which exactly mirrors the option, which is the correct option. But generally, the idea behind an inference is that it's something derived. All right. So, uh, so can you give me the answer to this example before you? This population wala example. What do you think is the correct answer? Okay, so I'm getting option C. Anyone else who thinks differently? Okay, so yeah, option C is correct. What basically is happening in this passage, the author is trying to draw a correlation between the increase in population and the increase in famine, which is why in option C we are saying that if the population increased in 2005, it is likely that there was also a famine increase in 2005. But if you notice, the author does not explicitly state this. The author just tells you that in each year from 2000 to 2010, sorry, yeah, in each year from 2000 to 2010, whenever the world population increased, famine also increased. From that, we are deriving that if we compare 2004 and 2005, and let's say the 2005 population has increased, that implies that the famine has also increased from 2004. All right. So that is, I think, a good exercise of understanding what an inference is. Now, okay. Now, there are multiple inferences which the author can have, but an inference is generally a definitely true statement. So when you have multiple options, the options might give you a possibility that maybe X is possible, Y is possible, Z is possible. But what is definitely true is the correct answer. In the previous question, it is possible that the population increased every year between 2000 to 2010. There could be like a geometric or an arithmetic progression of population. It was, sorry, it was, let's say, x in 2005, it became 2x in 2006, it became 3x or 4x in 2007. But that's not necessarily true. Maybe in 2005 and 2006 the population remained almost the same. Maybe in 2007 the population dropped, right? So option B is a possibility, but it's not definitely true. So in inferences, try to pick up those statements which are definitely true. Okay. So again, just let me know if you can see this slide points to remember.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So take a note of these.
Will inferences be always unstated?
Okay, so interesting question. See, technically they're supposed to be unstated, but CLAT sometimes, like I said, gives you such options in which one of the options is directly given in the passage. That is like a very blunt and simple answer. Go with that option, which is directly there in the passage. But technically, the see the what is it? What do you mean by inference? What do you mean by infer? You are concluding something from what is given to you, right? So it's your logical inference which has to make an impact. Okay. Generally, the by definition, an inference will not be directly stated. It will be implied, or it can be reasonably concluded. I hope that makes some sense. But in CLAT, you will come across questions where option is directly stated in the passage. And if you come across something like that, you can blindly go ahead with, okay, this is directly given in the passage, so that should be the inference. End of story. Not a problem at all. Right? So,
Yeah, got it.
point, yeah. So the third point here, take it with a pinch of salt. What I'm also trying to tell you is how actually this concept of inference works, right? CLAT sort of makes it easier, but generally the idea is that it's not directly stated. Okay. So an inference is a true statement. Again, just like a central idea, inference cannot contradict the author. If you find any option which contradicts the author or weakens the author's argument, that is simply not an inference for sure. Okay. And I've explained it to you why an inference must be definitely true and not just a mere possibility. All right.
Sometimes it is the same case with assumptions as well. Assumptions are supposed to be unstated, right? But
Yes.
in
Yeah.
certain
Yes. Yes. Correct. Yeah, that's true, actually. So when we'll discuss assumptions, which I think is the next lecture, if I'm not wrong, assumptions, same problem happens. Assumption is technically supposed to be an unstated premise, right? That's how CR is taught to you guys, I hope, right? Assumption is an unstated premise, but sometimes they will state the assumption in the passage itself, which does not make sense in my opinion. But again, that's the best option, so go with that. So a lot of times, CLAT is about, rather than arriving at the correct option, it's more about arriving at the best out of the four options. Okay, so take this with a pinch of salt. That's it. Okay, let's just dive into some practice questions. So I have a couple of practice questions in this, and I hope this will, help you understand what inferences are. Just let me know. Sorry. Yeah. Uh, okay. Okay. So this passage you've read, right? It's the same PhD scholar passage. Can you see it on your screens? Just give me a yes in the chat box if
no,
possible.
sir, no.
Okay. Okay. Just a second. Just give me a sec. Now it's visible. I think it just takes some time to uh, get displayed on your screen. But okay. Anyways. So this is the same passage, but there's a different question. Uh, okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to focus on this line. That is a whole separate story altogether, rather than novel altogether.
Are
right?
you sharing the screen right now?
Is it visible? I am sharing the screen. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, so.
Yeah, okay, great. So, so yeah, so just focus on this line. I'll change the slide in a bit. I've changed the slide. This is basically the same passage, okay? And this is the question. I hope the question will appear in a moment. Can you see the question, everyone?
Yes, so.
Okay. Now you have, so basically this question is specifically asking you to infer something from a particular line that is a whole separate story rather a novel altogether. What do you think is the inference? I'll Yeah, pretty simple. Yes, very good. So D, because the author says that supervisors वाला जो issue है that is something completely separate, which is an issue in itself, but I want to focus on the toxicity by my peers, right? So that is what the author is focusing, and D is the correct option. Brilliant. So see, sometimes inference questions में problem, it's very easy to eliminate because this is very literal. Option A, if you see, is very literal, right? Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, for some reason I got disconnected. Uh, okay, I'll share my screen again. Just let me know. Is the screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's visible, right? Okay, brilliant. So, uh, so this was the case. So you've solved it, great, right? We'll move on to the next question. Uh, can you read this and let me know? Is the passage visible? It's an extract from the Happy Prince, and I want you to answer a couple of questions on that if you can. Can you see it?
Yes, so.
Okay, great. Just give it just read it, give it some time. Yeah, hi. I'll switch the slide. Just let me know if the other slide is visible. Can you see the next slide?
Yes, so
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I'll show you the questions now. A sec. Okay. Which of the following can be inferred from the above passage? Okay. So I'm getting D as an answer. Yeah. D is correct because you do see this line that when the prince talks about that, okay, my heart is made of lead, or something like that. The solo very clearly say that, oh, what is he not solid gold, right? So that's directly a direct inference from something which was said in the previous line, right? Now, okay, so fairly simple, I guess. Option C is not the inference because if you see, it says, I was given the title of the Happy Prince, and happy indeed I was. So when he was given this title, it was not ironic. It was supposed to be apt, like because he's happy, that's why you're being called Happy Prince, right? So that was the idea. Okay, so this is again another question from basically the same passage, just another question. So can you like quickly tell me which of the following statements is true?
I have a doubt from the previous one.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, you may ask.
I think the option D was stating that the swallow was surprised to know that the statue was not made entirely of gold.
Hmm.
So we did not choose this option because it was stated in the passage. That's the
No,
reasoning
we
behind it.
chose option D. We chose
We
option
chose
D.
a,
Option D is, yeah.
so that's
The
the
reason
correct
was,
reasoning behind it, right? For
yeah, the
not
correct
choosing option
reasoning is that
D.
we can infer it from here. The basically the inference. So the passage does not directly tell you that the swallow was surprised, but if you read this expression, what is he not solid gold? That gives me an idea that okay, the swallow was expecting that the entire statue, including the heart of the statue, was made of pure gold, but the prince tells her that the heart is made of lead, right? That's what shocks the swallow, because of which we can infer that swallow was expecting that the entire statue would be solid gold, but that's not the case. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I hope the question is again on your screen. What do you think is the correct answer to this question? The Madras High Court wala question again. Yes, it is D, and good because this was slightly tricky. So this is something which happens in CLAT. There'll be some questions which are very close by, um, right? So, s option C might confuse some people a bit, uh, but then option C is saying that certain creative expressions are bound to be offensive. Now, the passage does not say that some like creative expressions will definitely hurt someone or the other. That's not the point. But the broader point of the author is that every humorous expression should be understood reasonably and rationally. Okay, so this is not like directly given, but the author talks about how there has to be a reasonable understanding of a situation, right? It should not be like the examples which the judge gives, that using a holy cow, it it is a metaphor which varies from person to person, place to place, right? So human expressions need to be understood reasonably and rationally. That's indeed the correct answer. Okay, now we'll jump to question number 4. How can we eliminate option A? Okay, just give me a sec. I'll go back to option A. Well, the so the author talks about that how. See, the author says that people are getting arrested for very innocuous social media posts. This does not necessarily mean that social media is being used to popularize insensitive and offensive posts. In fact, the author's position is that the social media post which the person faced an FIR for was actually very innocuous and like, just humorous. That's it. Okay, so option A may be correct in and of itself. Like if I tell you in general in a colloquial conversation that social media often popularize insensitive and offensive posts, you might say, yeah, that's correct. But in light of the passage, we don't have any information on the basis of which we can draw this conclusion. There is a mention of social media, but that is just to tell you that the post because of which the person got arrested was completely innocuous. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Yes, option A is a very generalized statement. The trick is that you need to figure out that statement which is supported by the passage. So it can't just be any statement out of the blue, right? Okay. So let me know if this question number 4 is visible to all of you. Uh, it's about COVID-19 outbreak. Do we have any ideas, any options, anything? Can you please mute yourself? I think there's some disturbance, whosoever that is. Okay, so I get D. Uh, any other
What's the
options? Okay,
answer?
I'm getting B as well. So it's not D for sure, and I'll tell you why. Uh, to quickly adopt to online teaching during the hmm. B is correct. Okay, so the entire essence of the passage is just to tell you that how it's quite difficult for all these teachers uh, to adopt to online teaching, because you don't have the same level of support and guidance when you're teaching online. So from the last few lines we can infer that option B is correct. Now option A is not wrong, is incorrect in the light of this passage, because this passage is not comparing the pre-online phase with the post-online phase, right? The passage is solely talking about the online aspect of teaching. So the passage is not saying that, oh, even when it is offline, even when online, it's very complex. That's not the idea of the passage, right? So B is the correct option. I'll tell you option C. Option C, my simple question is, what is this object of online teaching? What is this fundamental contradiction? Like, where is this coming from? The passage does not tell you that, okay, there was something happening in the offline model, but now because they switched to the online model, that there's a contradiction in that sense. All right. So because I don't know what this contradiction is, I can't go with C. So the correct answer has to be option B. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, perfect. Okay. I'll move on to the next slide. This is, yeah, okay. This is slightly uh, bigger passage. After this, we'll let me know if you can see the new slide. Is the new question visible? Question number 5, I guess. Just drop a yes in the chat box if you can see the question. Yeah, great. Okay, just go through the question and I'll show you, like, just go through the passage. I'll show you the question as well. Uh, and this will be the last question for our session today. And we'll conclude the session here because I'm facing some network issues at my end. So I don't think I can continue the session for some doubts. But what I can do is take all your doubts, whatever you can, just note them down or something. And we can maybe discuss it in the next session. But if I'm able to get some good connectivity and like if I have some time, we'll discuss some doubts before leaving as well. Okay, I'll change now. You can read the questions. It's actually a fairly simple one. Okay, I'll show the passage again. Sure. Do you? Does anyone have an answer? I'll show the pass. Just take note of the options. I'll show the passage again. Okay, we have option C. Any other answers, anyone? I'll show the questions now. Yeah, C is the correct answer. And this is entirely through elimination. So I told you that an inference cannot contradict the author. Option A contradicts the author because the second part says they therefore find it easy for new opportunities to come by. Well, the entire point of the author is to tell you that how aging women find it difficult to access senior positions and therefore their career paths takes a hit, right? Option B is incorrect, contradictory straight away because it says find it easier to get access. Option C is correct because it says do not find it easy and therefore career progression is harder to come by. All right. So in all, option C is the correct answer. Okay. So yeah, so that's it for today. That's so yeah, that's pretty much it. We'll take up doubts in the next session. But yeah, I hope you had a great time. I hope you got some idea of what inferences and what main point questions are. Please keep hold on to your doubts. We'll take them up in the next session. Thank you so much.
Sure,
Bye bye.
thank you.